Okay, so I've read probably 26 books in 2025. I watch a lot of videos like this. I thought I'd try to make one myself because I started reading a lot this year. Most of them are classics. There's some that are fantasy, but I'm just gonna walk you through them one by one. And then we'll go through and rank them at the end. So for the first one, I have Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. This was my introduction to his world in book format, and I loved it. It's essentially a history book, or it's written like it's a history book, but the way that he tells the story leaves out a lot of facts, like real history, which I thought was really well done. A lot of world building, and yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So then I read, immediately following that one, Game of Thrones. Of course, I've seen the show. I guess the show sticks a lot to the book's plot lines, so this was very similar, masterclass in storytelling all the way around. Then I read Clash of Kings. I wasn't as big of a fan as this, and I don't know, it felt a lot more cumbersome to get through. I still enjoyed it, but especially since season 2 is one of my least favorite seasons of the show, I don't know, I just didn't love it all the way around. And I also thrifted this one, and this is like the OG cover. All right, so then I read The Fall by Albert Camus. This is a story about a man who watches something crazy happen. His life starts to kind of spiral after that. I really enjoyed this book. I don't think it's as good as The Stranger, but I thought it was still a really good addition to Camus' work, and I'm very interested to read more of him in the future, but very solid book, short, simple. Speaking of short, then I read Schoolgirl by Osama Dazai. This is the third book of his I've read. I read No Longer Human and The Setting Sun in 2024. So reading this, I was just expecting more despair, and it definitely is more despair. But I don't know, it's a lot more positive and beautiful in a lot of areas. I really enjoyed it. It's just about a teenage girl going through depression and the grief of losing her father. I thought it was really good and really moving at points for such a small book. I think it clocks in, this edition I have is 103 pages. So short, simple read. You can read it in one day. Then I read The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I had read John Steinbeck in high school before with Of Mice and Men, and I read it again in this lineup of books, but I don't know, I thought The Pearl was phenomenal. It's short, it's simple, it's just a story about the overall power of greed. Very vibrant world, and it got me wanting to read a lot more Steinbeck, which you'll see in the later list I end up doing. All right, and then I read Silence by Shizuku Endo. So I'd heard of the movie by Martin Scorsese, and then I figured out there was a book about it. So before I watched the movie, I wanted to read the book, and I'm so glad that I did. This book is genuinely phenomenal, and it ended up being one of, if not my favorite of the bunch. It's about a Jesuit priest that goes to Japan under a time of Christian persecution, and they're trying to get Sebastian, the main character in this book, to denounce his faith, and it's him struggling with the silence of God amidst tragedy. And I thought it was phenomenal. It doesn't really take a stance. Shizuku Endo was a Christian Japanese man, so you would think he's strictly pulling for the Christian side of it, but it's very unbiased and beautiful, and has a complete understanding of not only what it means to be human, but what it means to be human and Christian, and the battles that come with that. So it's fully amazing, and it's one of my favorite things ever now. So, and I read Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This book was insane. It's just about a dude who wakes up one day and he's a cockroach, and his first thought is how he's going to get to work. Really funny, but also just deeply, deeply depressing. It's a beautiful little study about the human experience in 120 pages, so I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I want to read more Kafka going forward. Then I read The Death of Ivan Ilyich and Master of Man by Leo Tolstoy. I've read a little bit of Russian literature before this. I've read Notes from Underground, White Nights, but this is my first Tolstoy, and I was pleasantly surprised. I had heard about The Death of Ivan Ilyich a lot from just a lot of different people on book YouTube and book TikTok, but I surprisingly hadn't heard a lot about Master and Man, which in my opinion was just as good. And whoever put these two together was a genius, because you see The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and it's a man coming to this realization of his death and kind of running away from it almost. And Master and Man is kind of the opposite. So these two complement each other really well. And if you can, I would try to get this edition just so you can get those two together or read them together. Then I read Slaughterhouse-Five. Books don't really make me laugh out loud a lot, and this one did. And not only on top of that, it's an anti-war book, and it really is just surreal and crazy. This book was weird because I loved it when I was reading it, and it was very hard to put down, and it's so creative, but I really haven't thought about it a lot since I've read it. It's been 8 months now. I don't know. This book's really creative. I want to read more of Vonnegut, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but I want to read more of him. Then I read The Sailor Who Fell from Grace from the Sea by Yukio Mishima. So I wanted to pick him up. I've been wanting to read him for a long time, and over the course of this reading journey, I've realized that I really enjoy Japanese literature, and I thought this book was phenomenal. It's about a boy who forms a relationship, almost like a paternal relationship with a sailor, and that sailor kind of also embodies what Yukio Mishima thinks Japan is supposed to be. And as the sailor progresses and starts to change, the boy starts to get disgusted with him, and you start to see all these clashes of, I guess, the old world and the new world, but it's all driven through these characters. So I thought it was really good. I can't really speak much on Yukio Mishima's life or his political stances, because from what I've heard, it's pretty crazy. I'm pretty sure he committed suicide because he was tired of modern Japan and wanted to go back to Imperial Japan. If I'm right, let me know. I thought this book, just off of the book alone, was phenomenal. So then I read Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton, and I will say that this was the biggest surprise of the bunch. It's a love tale, and to be honest, I'm not somebody who really wants to read about a love triangle or things like that. So reading the back of this book, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be something I like, but I was just looking for some shorter books to kind of fill my spaces, and it's a classic, so I thought I'd read it. And phenomenal book all the way around. Loved almost every single aspect of this book, and there's a lot that this book, I think, is trying to say about indecisiveness and not really knowing what you want and the damage that can do to yourself and others. And it's just a very tragic and gorgeous tale of love and lost love. So yeah, strongly recommend this one. So then I read The Tao Te Ching. I can't really rate this. With most of these smaller books, there was I was trying to kind of challenge myself to read as much as possible in a short time frame. So I was reading 14 books in 14 days, so a book a day for 2 weeks. And I actually posted a TikTok about that, and I went through and I rated these 14 books that I read. And I rated this one extremely low, and I got a lot of hate for it. So I'm gonna have to revisit this one. Most of the markups I have here are things I generally agree with, but there was some stuff that I disagreed with, and maybe that's just how I see the world, but I need to reread it. This is a very significant book to a lot of people, so I want to go back through it with a lot of respect. So when we get to the rating part, I'll probably leave this one out, just letting you know. Then I read Of Mice and Men. So I did read this in high school. I didn't really remember anything about it except for you know who and the ending, because I mean, it's kind of like an iconic ending if you know anything about books, but I was pleasantly surprised. The end had me almost tearing up at the end. It's just a beautiful book about friendship and how culture can kind of stain innocence. And I just thought it was really good. And it's the second Steinbeck book I read this year, and it caused me to get one of the ones that I'm going to get to in a minute. And that book ends up being one of my favorites. So this was phenomenal. Short, simple. It's for everybody, and I strongly recommend it. Then I read The Emissary by Yoko Tawada. This was the biggest piece of garbage I've ever read. And I'm not trying to be rude, I'm really not. Because this cover was so cool, And I saw the little sticker and it got me the National Book Award winner. So I thought that I was in for something really special. It's almost like this dystopian, weird world. The world building was really cool, but the majority of this book is world building, world building, world building. The characters don't really have a lot of depth. And then at the very end, this plot twist, or I don't even know if it had been building up to it because it didn't make any sense. It just came completely out of left field and then the book ended. All that progression I had been reading was for absolutely nothing. And then I did not like this book, respectfully. I mean, if you do, good for you. I hated it. Then I read Camus' Happy Death. This is almost like a draft of The Stranger, or it feels that way. It's very similar in plot. Yeah, so if you enjoy Camus and if you enjoyed The Stranger, I would recommend reading this because it is more rough around the edges for sure. But there's a lot of parts where I feel like Camus lets himself go a lot more, so that can actually lead to some more interesting writing if you didn't love the completely brief, kind of point and dry feeling of The Stranger. So then I read Stoner by John Williams. This was one of the best books I read this year. It's about William Stoner, a man who was born on a farm. He goes to college and he falls in love with literature and he starts his course to become a professor. There's something really, really masterful about the way that this book was written. I don't know how to say it. I've seen the term quiet masterpiece be used with it a lot, but it's a very good description of it because it's not begging for your attention. Then I read East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This is the book I've been talking about the whole entire time. This was the best book I read the whole entire year. It's a little thick, so it took me a minute to get through. It's a generational story about the power of greed, love, forgiveness, generational trauma, all of it. And it kind of parallels the biblical story of Adam and Eve, kind of. This book was phenomenal, vibrant. There's a depth to these characters that cannot be understated. And it does it all with so little effort, or it feels that way. It's gorgeous. I've been actually thinking about getting a tattoo based off of the central theme of this, which is Tim Shell, which if you read the book, you know what that means. But then I read Confessions by St. Augustine. So this one I'm probably going to have a little bit of personal bias because I myself am Christian now. Actually, post this book, I saw myself a lot in St. Augustine. I mean, if you can't tell, this was one I sat with for a minute. His path kind of echoes mine a lot and how he found a path to God. And I just found it to be an all-around beautiful depiction of the divine and the relationship you can form with the divine, if that makes sense. Yes, it's not the most exciting read, but there's some passages in here that genuinely took my breath away. So then I read Death in Midsummer by Yukio Mishima. After A Sailor Who Fell from Grace from the Sea, I wanted to read more of him. This is just a collection of his short stories. There's not really a bad one in the bunch, and it was just a nice little introduction. If you got a chance, I'd pick that one up just if you liked any of Yukio Mishima's other work. So then I read The Castle of Antronato by Horace Walpole. This was a weird book. It's like kind of the first iteration of Gothic literature, or one of them, but it feels very like Shakespearean in nature. Essentially a building block book. Like, it's very cliche and it almost feels like a soap opera, but you can totally see the Gothic atmosphere that we all know and love, like, really being formed here. It's very Shakespearean in nature and it's kind of written poorly at times, but I kind of liked it. Like, it was cool, I guess, to see the conception of the Gothic atmosphere. And speaking of early Gothic material, I read The Monk by Matthew Lewis. I had heard about this for a long time, so I knew it was special, but I hadn't heard about it near as much as a lot of other Gothic material. This was one of my favorite reads of the year, just because I didn't really know what I was getting into, and it was just a well-written story. It is disturbing, so trigger warning for a lot of people out there. There are some things that happen in this book that are really, really awful. But it's essentially about a monk's fall into unspeakable acts and demonic nature. A lot of this book is speaking on the injustice of the church at the time too, which I thought was really, really cool to see. Matthew Lewis had to have balls of steel, because even by today's standard, it's like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Like, I don't know, it's not disturbing in my opinion for the sake of being disturbing. It's disturbing in order to shine light on something. So I think that this was gorgeous. And if you love that dark Gothic atmosphere with the castles and the evil and all that stuff, this is one of the best books I think you can read. Then I read Frankenstein. I thought that I wasn't going to enjoy it as much as a lot of other people did, but I did. This was one of my favorite books I read, well, probably ever, actually. I loved the way it's structured, with part 1 being Dr. Frankenstein, with part 2 being Frankenstein's creation, and then 3 kind of being how you know, wraps up and concludes. Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak about this one enough. This was a genuine masterpiece. And the fact she wrote this when she was 19 years old, 19. So this one's kind of cheating, but currently I'm still reading it. It is The Count of Monte Cristo. This is why I'm still reading it. I'm currently 340 pages into this 1,200 page long spanning story. It's about a guy's revenge after his betrayal by his friends. He was just an innocent man who got framed, and he gets sent away to prison, and his whole entire life gets taken away. And he spends 13 very long years in prison, and he comes out with an absolute vengeance. This is so good so far, and I see it going really high in my rankings, but you know, since I haven't finished it, I'm not gonna fully put it, but I definitely started it last year. It's just taken me such a long time to get through, but I'm loving every page of this. It's so good. This is my final ranking. I'm sure some people are gonna have issue with this overall list, but I mean, this is just my opinion. This is how I rank them in terms of enjoyment I got from reading them. And there's a couple of these I'll probably need to read again, but that's the beautiful thing about them is I can always read them again and again. So that's my current ranking. And let me know what I should read in 2026. Thanks for watching. Bye.